इसके बाद फिर इकोलॉजी में ऑर्गेनिज्म एंड पॉपुलेशन का एनसीईआरटी है। तो एनसीईआरटी कहता है कि diversity is not only a characteristic of the living organism but also of the content in the biology textbook. Biology represented either as the botany, zoology, and the microbiology, or as the classical and the modern. The latter is a euphemism for the molecular aspect of the biology. Luckily, we have many trends in which weave the different areas of biological information into a unifying principle. Ecology is one such thread which gives us a holistic perspective to the biology. The essence of the biological understanding is to know how organism while remaining an individual interact with the other organism and physical habitats as a group, and hence behave like the organized wholes, that means population, community, ecosystem, or even as a whole biosphere. Ecology explains to us all this. A particular aspect of this is the study of the anthropogenic environmental degradation and the socio-political issue it has raised. This unit describes as well as takes a critical view of the above aspects. तो ये रामदेव मिश्रा हैं। रामदेव मिश्रा जो है वो रामदेव मिश्रा जो है वो फादर ऑफ इंडियन इकोलॉजी कहा जाता है। तो रामदेव मिश्रा रिवर्ड एज द फादर ऑफ द इकोलॉजी इन इंडिया ऑन born on the 26th August 1900. Ramdev Mishra obtained a PhD in ecology under Professor W.H. Purcell, FRS from the Leeds University in the UK. He established teaching and research in ecology at the Department of the Botany at the BHU, Varanasi. His research laid the foundation for the understanding of the tropical community and their succession, environmental response of the plant population and their productivity, and nutrient cycling in the tropical forest and the grassland ecosystem. Mishra founded the first postgraduate course in the ecology in the India. Over 50 scholars obtained PhD under his supervision and moved on to the other university and research institute to initiate ecology teaching and research across the country. He was honored with the fellowship of the Indian National Science Academy and the World Academy of the Arts and the Sciences and the prestigious Sanjay Gandhi Award in the Environment and the Ecology. Due to his efforts, the government of the India established the National Committee for the Environmental Planning and Coordination 1922, which in later years paved the way for the establishment of the Ministry of the Environment and the Forest 1984. तो ऑर्गेनिज्म एंड द पॉपुलेशन आता है। पॉपुलेशन इसमें कहता है कि our living world is a fascinatingly diverse and amazingly complex. We can try to understand its complexity by investigating processes at the various levels of the biological organization: macromolecules, cell, tissue, organs, individual organism, population, communities, ecosystem, and biomes. At any level of the biological organization, we can ask two types of the question. For example, where when we hear the bull singing early morning in the garden, we may ask how does the bird sing, or why does the bird sing. That how type question seek the mechanism behind the process, while the why type question seek the significance of the process. For the first question in our example, the answer might be in the terms of the operation of the voice box and the vibrating bone in the bird, whereas for the second question, the answer may lie in the bird's need to communicate with its mate during the breeding season. When you observe nature around you with a scientific frame of the mind, you will certainly come up with many interesting questions of both the type: why are the night blooming flowers generally white? How does the bee know which flower has nectar? Why does cactus have so many thorns? How does the chick first recognize her own mother? And so on. इसके बाद कहता है कि you have already learnt in the previous class that ecology is a subject which studies the interaction among the organism and between the organism and its physical abiotic environment. Ecology is physically confined with the four levels of the biological organism, population, community, and the biomes. In this chapter, we explore ecology at the population level. तो population के attributes देखेंगे। तो in the nature, we rarely find isolated single individuals of any species. Majority of them live in the groups in a well-defined geographical area, share or compete for the similar resources, potentially interbreed, and thus constitute a population. Although the term interbreeding implies sexual reproduction, a group of the individuals resulting from the even asexual reproduction is also generally considered as a population for the purpose of the ecological studies. All the cormorants in the wetland, rats in the abundant dwelling, teak wood trees in the forest tract, bacteria in the culture plate, and lotus plant in a pond are some example of the population. In the early chapters, you have learnt that although individual organism is the one that has the cope with a changed environment, it is at the population level that natural selection operates to evolve the desired traits. Population ecology is therefore an important area because it links ecology to the population genetics and the evolution. फिर आता है कि a population has certain attributes whereas an individual organism does not. An individual may have birth and the death, but a population has birth and the death rate. In a population, this rate refers to the per capita birth and the death. The rate hence expressed are the changes in the numbers increase or the decrease with respect to the members of the population. Here is an example: if a pond there was 20 lotus plant last year and through the reproduction 8 new plants were added, taking the current population to 28. We calculate the birth rate at the 8 by 20 यानी कि 0.4 offspring per lotus per year. If 4 individuals in a laboratory population of the 40 fruit flies died during a specified time interval, say a week, the death rate in the population during the period is 4 by 40 यानी कि 0.1 individuals per fruit fly per week. फिर आता है कि another attribute characteristic of the population is the sex ratio. An individual is either a male or a female, but a population has a sex ratio. Example: 50% of the population are the females and the 40% are the males. A population at any given time is composed of the individuals of the different ages. If the age distribution percent individuals of the given age or the age group is plotted for the population, the resulting structure is called as the age pyramid. For the human population, the age pyramid generally shows age distribution of the males and the females in the diagram. The shape of the pyramid reflects the growth of status of the population, example whether it is growing, stable or declining. फिर आता है ये पोस्ट रिप्रोडक्टिव है, रिप्रोडक्टिव है, प्री रिप्रोडक्टिव है. तो ये दिखाया हुआ है एक्सपैंडिंग का, यह है स्टेबल का और यह है डिक्लाइनिंग का. तो रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द एज पिरामिड फॉर द ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशन है जो दिए हुए है. तो इसमें है द size of the population tell us about its status in the habitat, whether the ecological process gives to investigate in the population, be it the outcome of the competition with another species, the impact of a predator or the effect of a pesticide application. We always evaluate them in the terms of any change in the population size. The size in the nature could be as low as less than 10 Siberian cranes at the Bharatpur wetlands in any area in any year, or go into the millions. Chlamydomonas in a pond. Population size, technically called the population density, denoted at the n, need not necessarily be measured in the numbers only. Although total number is generally the most appropriate measure of the population density, it is in some cases either meaningless or difficult to determine. In an area, if there are dose of carrot grassage, Parthenium hysterophorus plant, but only a single huge banyan tree with a large canopy, stating that the population density of the banyan is low relative to that of the carrot grass, amounts to the underestimating the enormous role of the banyan in that community. In such cases, the per percent of the biomass is a more meaningful measure of the population size. Total number is again not an easily adaptable measure if the population is huge and counting is impossible to very time consuming. If we have a dense laboratory culture of the bacteria in a petri dish, what is the best measure to report its density? Sometimes for the certain ecological investigation, there is no need to know about the absolute population density. Relative density serve the purpose equally as well. For instance, the number of the fish caught per trap is good enough measure of the total population density in the lake. We are mostly obligated to estimate population sizes indirectly without actually counting them or seeing them. The tiger census in our national park and the tiger ears is often based on the pug marks and the fecal pellets. फिर आता है पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ. तो कहता है कि द साइज ऑफ ए पॉपुलेशन फॉर एनी स्पीसीज इज नॉट a static parameter. It keeps changing with the time depending on the various factors including food availability, predation, pressure and adverse weather. In fact, it is these changes in the population density that give us some idea of what is happening to the population, whether it is flourishing or declining. Whatever might be the ultimate reason, the density of a population in a given habitat during a given period fluctuates due to change in the four basic processes. फिर कहता है कि two of which natality and the immigration contribute to an increase in the population density and two mortality and the immigration to a decrease. Natality refers to the number of the birth during a given period in the population that are added to the initial density. Mortality is the number of the death in the population during a given period. Immigration is the number of the individuals of the same species that have come to the habitat from the elsewhere during the time period under the consideration. Immigration is the number of the individuals of the population who left the habitat and gone elsewhere during the time period under the consideration. तो नेटेलिटी हो गया, इमिग्रेशन, मोर्टेलिटी और इधर इमिग्रेशन हो गया. कहता है कि so if the n is the population density at the time t, then its density at the time t plus 1 is nt plus 1 is equal to nt plus b plus 5 minus d plus e. We can see from the above equation that population density will increase if the number of the birth plus the number of the immigrants b plus 5 more than the number of the death plus the number of the immigrants d plus e. And the normal condition birth and death are the most important factors influencing population density. Other two factors assuming importance only under special condition. For instance, if a new habitat is just being colonized, immigration may contribute more significantly to the population growth than the birth rate. फिर आता है growth model. So that the growth of a population with the time for an specific and the predictable pattern. We have been concerned about the unbridled human population growth and the problems created by it in our country, and it therefore natural for us to be curious if different animal population in the nature behave the same way or show some restraint on the growth. Perhaps we can learn a lesson or two from the nature on how to control the population growth. Exponential growth refers to food and space availability is obviously essential for the unimpeded growth of a population. Ideally, when the resources in the habitat are unlimited, each species has the ability to realize fully its net potential to grow in the number, as Darwin observed by developing his theory of the natural selection. Then the population grows in an exponential or the geometric fashion. If a population size of the n, the birth rate, not total not total number birth per capita birth are represented as the B, and the death rate again per capita death rate as the D. Then the increase or the decrease in the n unit time period t dn by dt will be dn by dt equal to b minus d into n. Let b minus d equal to r, then the dn by dt equal to rn. फिर आता है कि the R in this equation is called intrinsic rate of the natural increase and is very important parameter chosen for assessing impacts of an abiotic or the abiotic factors on the population growth. To give you some idea about the magnitude of the R values for the Norway rate, the R is 0.015 and for the floor beetle it is 0.12. In 1981, the R value for the human population in India was 0.0205. Find out what the current R value is. For calculating it, you need to know the birth rate and the death rate. The above equation describe the exponential or the geometric pattern of a population and yields in the J-shaped curve when we plot n in relation to the time. If you are familiar with the basic calculus, you can derive the integral form of the exponential growth equation as nt equal to n naught rt, where nt is the population density after the time t, n naught is the population density at the time 0, r is the intrinsic rate of the natural increase, e is the base of the natural logarithm, 2.49828. Any species growing exponentially under the unlimited resources condition can reach enormous population density in a short time. फिर ये दिए हुए है population growth when the responses are not limiting the growth plot is exponential. B when the responses are limiting the growth plot is logistic. K यहाँ पर है जो carrying capacity है. dn by dt is equal to rn k minus n k और dn by dt is equal to rn है जो दिए हुए. फिर आता है कि डार्विन found how even a slow growing animal like the elephant could reach enormous number in the absence of the checks. The following is an anecdote popularly narrated to demonstrate dramatically how fast a huge population could build up when growing exponentially. तो ये कोई स्टोरी है लेकिन है जो इम्पोर्टेंट है जो नहीं है क्योंकि इसे जो नहीं आता है. फिर आता है लॉजिस्टिक ग्रोथ. तो no population of any species in nature has its disposal unlimited resources to permit exponential growth. This leads to the competition between the individuals for the limited resources. Eventually, the fittest individual will survive and reproduce. The government of many countries have also realized this fact and introduced various restraints with a view to limit human population growth in nature. In a given habitat has enough resources to support a maximum possible number, beyond which no further growth is possible. Let us call this limit as the nature's carrying capacity K for that species in that habitat. A population growing in a habitat with limited resources show initially a lag phase followed by a phase of deceleration and deceleration and finally an asymptote. When the population density reaches the carrying capacity, a plot of the n in relation to the time t results in the Schumann curve. This type of population growth is called as the Verloft per logistic growth and is described by the following equation dn by dt equal to rn k minus n by k, where n जो है पॉपुलेशन डेंसिटी टाइम टी है, आर है जो इंटेंसिक रेट ऑफ द नेचुरल इंक्रीज है, के है जो कैरिंग कैपेसिटी है. तो सिंस द रिसोर्सेज फॉर द ग्रोथ फॉर द मोस्ट एनुअल पॉपुलेशन आर फिनाइट एंड बिकम लिमिटिंग सूनर और द लेटर, द लॉजिस्टिक ग्रोथ मॉडल इज कंसिडर्ड एज ए मोर रियलिस्टिक वन. Gather from the government funds of data the population figures for the India for the last 100 years, plot them and check which growth pattern is evident. फिर आता है लाइफ हिस्ट्री वेरिएशन। तो population evolved to maximize their reproductive fitness, also called Darwinian fitness, high R value in the habitat in which they live. Under a particular set of the selection prefer, organisms evolved towards the most efficient reproductive strategies. Some organisms breed only once in their lifetime, Pacific, salmon, fish, bamboo, while others breed many times during their lifetime. Most birds and animals, some produce a large number of the small fat offspring, just oyster, pelagic fish, while others produce a small number of the large fat offspring birds, mammals. So which is reliable for the maximizing fitness. Ecology suggests that life history traits of the organism have evolved in relation to the constants imposed by the abiotic and the biotic components of the habitat in which they live. Evolution of the life history trait in a different species currently an important area of the research being conducted by the ecologist. फिर आता है पॉपुलेशन इंट्रैक्शन। तो कहता है कि कैन यू थिंक ऑफ एनी नेचुरल हैबिtat ऑन द अर्थ दैट इज इनहेबिटेड just by a single species? There is no such habitat and such a situation is even inconceivable. For any species, the minimal requirement is one more species on which it can feed. Even a plant species which makes its own food cannot survive alone. It needs soil microbes to break down the organic matter in the soil and return the inorganic nutrients for the absorption. And then, how will the plant manage pollination without an animal agent? It is obvious that in the nature, animals, plants, and microbes do not and cannot live in isolation but interact in a various way to form a biological community. Even in the minimal communities, many interactive linkages exist, although all may not be readily apparent. Interspecies interaction arise from the interaction of the population of the two different species. They could be beneficial, detrimental, or the neutral, neither harm nor benefit to one of the species or both, assigning a plus sign for the beneficial interaction, minus sign for the detrimental, and 0 for the neutral interaction. Let us look at all the possible outcomes of the interspecies interaction. तो यहाँ पर दिया हुआ है कि प्लस प्लस हो गया तो म्यूचुअलिज्म हो जाएगा, माइनस माइनस तो कंपटीशन, प्लस माइनस तो प्रीडेशन, प्लस माइनस तो पैरासिटिज्म, प्लस जीरो तो कॉमेंसलिज्म और माइनस जीरो तो हो जाएगा एमेंसलिज्म हो जाएगा। कहता है कि both the species benefit in the mutualism and both lose in the competition in their interaction with each other. In the both parasitism and the predation, only one species benefits, parasite and predator respectively, and the interaction is detrimental to the other species, host and the prey respectively. The interaction where one species benefited and the other is neither benefited nor harmed is called the commensalism. In commensalism, on the other hand, one species is harmed while the other is unaffected. Predation, parasitism, and the commensalism share a common characteristic. The interacting species live closely together. इसके बाद फिर आता है प्रीडेशन। तो कहता है कि व्हाट वुड हैपन टू ऑल द एनर्जी फिक्स्ड बाय द autotrophic organism if the community has no animals to eat the plants. You can think of the predation as the nature's way of transferring to the higher trophic levels the energy fixed by the plants. When we think of the predator and the prey, most probably it is the tiger and the deer that rarely come to our mind. But a sparrow eating any seed is no less a predator. Although many animals eating plants are categorized separately as the herbivores, they are in a broad ecological context not very different from the predators. Besides acting as a conduit of the energy transfer across the trophic levels, predators play other important roles. They keep prey population under control, but for the predators, prey species could achieve very high population density and cause the ecosystem instability. When certain exotic species are introduced into a geographical area, they become invasive and start spreading fast because the invaded land does not have its natural predators. The prickly pear cactus introduced into Australia in the early 1920s caused havoc by spreading rapidly into the millions of the hectares of the rangeland. Finally, the invasive cactus by brought under control only after a cactus feeding predator are moved from its natural habitat by introduced into the country. Biological control methods adopted in agriculture pest control are based on the ability of the predator to regulate and prey population. Predators also help in maintaining a species diversity in a community by reducing the intensity of the competition among the competing prey species. In the rocky intertidal communities of the American Pacific coast in the starfish disaster is an important predator. In field experiment when all the starfish were removed from an included intertidal area, more than 10 species of the invertebrates become extinct within a year because of the interspecies competition. If a predator is too efficient and overexploits its prey, then the prey might become extinct, and following it, the predator will also become extinct for the lack of the food. This is the reason why predators in the nature are prudent. Prey species have evolved various defenses to lessen the impact of the predation. Some species of the insects and the frogs are cryptically colored, camouflaged to avoid being detected easily by the predator. Some are poisonous and therefore avoided by the predators. The monarch butterfly is highly distasteful to its predator, but because of the special chemical present in its body. Interestingly, the butterfly acquires the chemical during its caterpillar stage by the feeding on a poisonous bead. फिर कहता है कि for the plant, herbivorous are the predators. Nearly 25% of the all insects are known to be phytophagous and feeding on the plant sap and the other parts of the plant. The problem is particularly severe for the plant because unlike animals, they cannot run away from their predators. Plants therefore have evolved an astonishing variety of the morphological and the chemical defense against herbivores. Thorns, acacia, cactus are the most common morphological means of the defense. Many plants produce and store chemicals that make the herbivore sick when they are eaten, inhibiting the feeding or digestion, disrupt its reproduction, or even kill it. You must have seen the weed calotropis growing in the abandoned fields. The plant produces highly poisonous cardiac glycosides, and that is why you never see any cattle or goats browsing on this plant. A wide variety of the chemical substances that we extract from the plant on a commercial scale, nicotine, caffeine, quinine, astringent, opium, etc., are produced by them actually a defense against the grazers and the browsers. Free competition. So when Darwin spoke of the struggle for the existence and the survival of the fittest in the nature, he was convinced that interspecies competition is a potent force in the organic evolution. It is generally believed that competition occurs when the closely related species compete for the same resources that are limiting. But this is not entirely true. Firstly, totally unrelated species could also compete for the same resources. For instance, in the some hollow South American lakes, visiting flamingos and the resident fishes compete for their common food, the zooplankton in the lake. Secondly, resources need not be limiting for the competition to occur. In the interference competition, the feeding efficiency of one species might be reduced due to the interfering and the inhibitory presence of the other species, even if the resources, food, and the fish are abundant. Therefore, the competition is defined as a forced process in which the fitness of the one species measured in terms of its R, the intrinsic rate, or the increase is significantly lower in the presence of another species. It is relatively easy to demonstrate in the laboratory experiment as Gauss and the other experimental ecologists did. When resources are limited, the competitively superior species will eventually eliminate the other species. But evidence of such competitive exclusion occurring in the nature is not always conclusive. A strong and persuasive circumstantial evidence does not exist. However, in some cases, the abundant tortoise in the Galapagos Islands became extinct within a decade after goats were introduced on the island. Apparently, due to the greater browsing efficiency of the goats, another evidence for the occurrence of the competition in nature comes from what is called as the competitive release, a species whose distribution is restricted to a small geographical area because of the presence of the competitive superior genes is found to expand its distributional range dramatically when the competing species is experimentally removed. Connell's elegant field experiment for that on the rocky sea coast of the Scotland, the larger and the competitive superior barnacle Balnus dominates the intertidal area and excludes the smaller barnacle Cathylamus from that zone. In general, herbivores and the plant appear to be more adversely affected by the competition than the carnivores. फिर आता है गॉसी competitive exclusion principle states that the two closely related species competing for the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely and the competitive inferior one will be eliminated eventually. This may be true if some resources are limiting but not otherwise. More recent studies do not support such gross generalization about the competition. While they do not rule out the occurrence of the interspecies competition in the nature, they point out that a species facing competition might evolve mechanisms that promote coexistence rather than the exclusion. One such mechanism is the resource partitioning. If two species compete for the same resources, they could avoid competition by choosing, for instance, different times for the feeding or different foraging patterns. MacArthur showed that five closely related species of the warblers living on the same tree were able to avoid competition and coexist due to the behavioral patterns difference in the foraging activities. Parasitium, considering that the parasitic mode of the life ensures free lodging and the meals, it is not surprising that the parasitium has evolved in so many taxonomic groups from the plants to the higher vertebrates. Many parasites have evolved to be host-specific. They can parasite only a single species of the host in such a way that both host and the parasite tend to co-evolve. That is, if the host evolves a special mechanism for rejecting or resisting the parasite has to evolve mechanism to contract and neutralize them in order to be successful with the same host species. In accordance with their life styles, parasites evolve a special adaptations such as the loss of the unnecessary sense organ, presence of the adhesive organ for the suckers to killing on the host, loss of the digestive system, and the high reproductive capacity. The life cycle of the parasite are often complex, involving one or two intermediate hosts or vectors to facilitate parasitization of its primary host. The human liver fluke, a trematode parasite, depends on the two intermediate hosts, a snail and a fish, to complete its life cycle. The malarial parasite needs a vector mosquito to spread to the other host. Majority of the parasites harm the host, but they may reduce the survival growth and the reproduction of the host and reduce its population density. They might render the host more vulnerable to the predation by making it physically weak. Do you believe that an ideal parasite should be able to thrive within the host without harming it? Then why did not natural selection lead to the evolution of such totally harmless parasite? कहता है कि parasites that feed on the external surface of the host organism are called ectoparasites. The most familiar examples of this group are the leaves on the humans and the ticks on the dogs. Many marine fishes are infested with the ectoparasite copypods. Cuscuta, a parasitic plant that is commonly found growing on the hedge plants, has lost its chlorophyll and lives in the course of the evolution. It derives its nutrition from the host plant, which is parasitized. The female mosquito is not considered a parasite, although it needs our blood for the reproduction. Can explain why? In contrast, endoparasites are those that live outside the host body at different sites: liver, kidney, lungs, red blood cells, etc. The life cycle of the endoparasites are more complex because of the extreme specialization. Their morphological and anatomical features are greatly simplified by emphasizing their reproductive potential. Brood parasitium in the bird is a fascinating example of the parasitium in which the parasitic bird lays its egg in the nest of its host and lets the host incubate them. During the course of the evolution, the eggs of the parasite bird have evolved to resemble the host egg in the size and color to reduce the chance of the host bird detecting the foreign eggs and ejecting them from the nest. Try to follow the movement of the cuckoo, quail, and crow in your neighborhood, park during the breeding season, spring to the summer, and watch the brood parasitium in the action. फिर आता commensalism. So this is the interaction in which the one species benefits and the other is neither harmed nor benefited. An orchid growing as an epiphyte on a mango branch and barnacles growing on the back of a vale benefit by the while neither the mango tree nor the vale derives any apparent benefit. The cattle egret and the grazing cattle in the close association, a sight you are most likely to catch if you live in the farmed rural areas, is a classic example of the commensalism. The egrets always forage due close to the where the cattle are grazing because of the cattle as they move stir up and fluff out insects from the vegetation that otherwise might be difficult for the egrets to find and catch. Another example of the commensalism is the interaction between the sea anemone that has the stinging tentacles and the clownfish that lives among them. The fish gets protection from the predators which stay away from the stinging tentacles. The anemone does not appear to derive any benefit by hosting the clownfish. इधर दिया हुआ है म्यूचुअल रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द फिग ट्री एंड द बाफ. फिग फ्लावर इज पॉलिनेटेड बाय द बाफ लेइंग एग्स इन द फिग फ्रूट. ये है जो दिखाया हुआ है. इसके बाद फिर आता है म्यूचुअलिज्म. तो कहता है कि दिस इंट्रैक्शन कॉन्फर्स बेनिफिट्स ऑन बोथ द इंटरेक्टिंग स्पीसीज लाइकन्स रिप्रेजेंट्स एन इंटीमेट म्यूचुअलिस्टिक रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द फंगस एंड द फोटोसिंथेसाइजिंग algae or the cyanobacteria. Similarly, the mycorrhiza are association between the fungi and the roots of the higher plants. The fungi help the plant in the absorption of the essential nutrients from the soil, while the plants in turn provide the fungi with the energy yielding carbohydrates. फिर कहता है कि द मोस्ट स्पेक्टिकुलर इन्वोशनरी फैसिनेटिंग एग्जाम्पल्स फॉर द म्यूचुअल फाउंड द प्लांट एनिमल रिलेशनशिप. Plant needs the help of the animals for the pollinating their flowers and dispersing their seeds. Animals obviously have to be paid fees for the service that plant expect from them. Plant offer rewards or fees in the form of the pollen and nectar for the pollinators and juicy and the nutritious fruits for the seed dispersers. But a mutually beneficial system should also be safeguarded against the cheaters. For example, animals that try to steal nectar without adding in the pollution. Now you can see why plant-animal interaction often involves co-evolution of the mutualist, that is, the evolution of the flower and its pollinator. Species are tightly linked with one another. In many species of the fig tree, there is a tight one-to-one relationship with the pollinator species of the bass. It means that a given species can be pollinated only by its partner bass species and no other species. The female bass uses the fruit not only as an oviposition egg-laying bud site, but with the developing seeds with the fruit or for the nourishing its larvae. The bass pollinates the fig inflorescence by searching for the suitable egg-laying sites. In return for the favor of the pollination, the fig offers the bass some of its developing seeds as a food for the developing bass larvae. Orchids show a bewildering diversity of the floral patterns, many of which have evolved to attract the rat pollinator insect, bees, and the bumblebees, ensure granted pollination by it. Not all orchids offer rewards. The Mediterranean orchid Ostrich employs sexual deceit to get pollination done by the species of the bee. One petal of its flower bears an uncanny resemblance to the female of the bee in the size, color, and the marking. The male bee is attracted to what it perceives as a female. Pseudocopulates with the flower, and during that process is dusted with the pollen from the flower. When the same bee pseudocopulates with another flower, it transfers pollen to it and thus pollinates the flower. Here you can see how coevolution coevolution operates if the female flower patterns change even slightly for any region during the coevolution. Pollination success will reduce unless the orchid flower coevolves to maintain the resemblance of its petal to the female bee. फिर ये दिया हुआ है कि showing bee pollinator on the orchid flower पर दिए हुए. तो इसका समरी है कि as a branch of the biology, ecology is the study of the relationship of the living organism with the abiotic physiochemical factors and the biotic components of other species of the environment. It is concerned with the four levels of the biological organization: organism, population, community, and the biomes. Evolutionary change occurs through the natural selection take place at the population level, and hence population ecology is an important area of the ecology. A population is a group of the individuals of a given species sharing or competing for the similar resources in a defined geographical area. Populations have attributes that individual organisms do not: birth rate, death rate, sex ratio, and the age distribution. The proportion of the driven age of the males and the females in the population is often represented graphically as an age pyramid. Its shape indicates whether a population is stationary, growing, or declining. Ecological effect of any factor on a population are generally reflected in its size, population density, which may be expressed in different ways: numbers, biomass, percent cover, depending on the species. Population growth through the birth and the immigration, and decline through the death and the immigration. When resources are unlimited, the growth is usually exponential, but when the resources become progressively limiting, the growth pattern does turn logistic. In either case, growth is ultimately limited by carrying capacity of the environment. The intrinsic rate of the natural increase R is a measure of the inherent potential of the population to grow. फिर कहता है कि इन द नेचर पॉपुलेशन ऑफ ए डिफरेंट स्पीसीज इन हैबिट डू नॉट लिव इन आइसोलेशन बट इंटैक्ट इन द मैनी वे डिपेंडिंग ऑन द आउटकम ऑफ दिस इंटरेक्शन बिटवीन टू स्पीसीज क्लासिफाइड एज ए कंपटीशन बोथ स्पीसीज सफर प्रीडेशन एंड द parasitism one benefit and other suffer commensalism one benefit and the other is unaffected commensalism one is harmed other unaffected and mutualism both species benefit. Predation is important process through which trophic energy is facilitated and some predators help in controlling their prey population. Plants have evolved diverse morphological and chemical defense against herbivory. In competition, it is presumed that the superior competitor eliminates the inferior one, the competitive exclusion principle, but many closely related species have evolved various mechanisms which facilitate their coexistence. Some of the most fascinating cases of the mutualism in the nature are seen in the plant-pollinator interaction.